Massive stones stand silent across the world, monuments to a lost age. How did ancient people with simple tools build these colossal structures? And who were the mysterious megalithic builders behind them? We are about to journey through 35 sections of investigation, where you will gain a complete understanding of how these marvels were truly created and what they meant to their creators. We will uncover how they moved 100-ton blocks and why they encoded celestial secrets into stone. What forgotten knowledge from our own past still waits to be remembered? These silent giants of stone share a common name, megaliths, a word that simply means large stones, but that simple definition barely scratches the surface of what they represent. A megalith is a large stone structure, often built by prehistoric communities using nothing but raw muscle and ingenuity, frequently fitted together without any mortar to bind them. They served a breathtaking array of purposes, from solemn tombs for the dead to sophisticated observatories for tracking the stars. Think of the iconic Stonehenge in England, a circular arrangement of towering stones known as a henge. Or picture the dolmens found across Europe, massive flat stones resting like tabletops on upright supports, creating ancient burial chambers. Then there are the solitary menhirs, single standing stones that pierce the sky, sometimes arranged in mysterious alignments for miles. What is truly staggering is their reach. You can find these monuments scattered from the windswept coasts of Scotland to the sun-baked plains of India, and even in the highlands of the Americas. They are a global phenomenon, a thread of common purpose connecting humanity's deepest past. Their scale is almost incomprehensible, with some blocks weighing more than 50 tons, and their endurance is a testament to their builders' skill, with many structures dating back over 5,000 years. They are more than just piles of rock. They are the physical manifestation of a universal human drive to create something that outlasts a single lifetime, to leave a permanent mark on the world. By studying their distinct forms and theorized functions, we begin the essential work of understanding the minds that conceived them. This foundational knowledge is our first step into a much deeper mystery, one that asks how and why these ancient people achieved the seemingly impossible. These massive stoneworks form a vast and puzzling network across the globe. In France, the Karnak stones stretch for miles like a petrified army, thousands of standing stones arranged in eerie, parallel rows. Far to the south, on the Mediterranean islands of Malta, underground temples were carved from solid limestone, their curving walls a testament to a forgotten ritual life. And across the Atlantic, the stepped pyramids of Mesoamerica, though often made of rubble and faced with stone, share that same megalithic ambition to reach for the heavens. This incredible distribution forces a difficult question. Did these cultures invent these monumental techniques in complete isolation? Or was some spark of knowledge passed along ancient trade routes, traveling from one shore to the next? The site of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey adds a profound layer to this mystery. This sprawling complex of carved T-shaped pillars was not built by settled farmers, but by hunter-gatherers, and it predates Stonehenge by a staggering 6,000 years. Its very existence shatters the old assumption that society had to master agriculture before it could attempt such grand projects. It proves that a pre-agricultural society could possess the social organization and symbolic vision to create a permanent, complex sanctuary. So, are we looking at the work of a single, lost ancestral tradition that slowly spread its ideas across the world? Or is this a case of convergent cultural evolution, where different human groups, facing similar spiritual or social needs, arrived at the same monumental solution independently? Archaeologists mapping these sites see distinct clusters, like the dense concentrations in Western Europe or along the Mediterranean coast, which might point to ancient cultural hubs or even the migration paths of early seafarers. This global network reveals an ancient world far more interconnected, or at least parallel in its thinking, than we once believed. To truly grasp the significance of these patterns, we must now look at when they happened, tracing the long and surprising timeline of megalithic construction itself. The timeline of these stone giants defies simple explanation, stretching across ages in a slow but relentless march of innovation. This was not a single moment of creation, but a tradition that flourished for thousands of years, from the dawn of the Neolithic period around 4500 BCE, well into the Bronze Age. In Europe, some of the earliest masterpieces emerged from the misty landscapes of ancient Ireland. The Great Passage Tomb of Newgrange, a massive, circular mound with a long inner corridor, was constructed around 3200 BCE. Its entrance was precisely engineered to capture the rays of the winter solstice sunrise, flooding the inner chamber with a golden light that lasted for just a few precious minutes. Centuries later, the iconic stone circles of Britain, like the famous Stonehenge, began to take shape, their forms evolving and becoming more sophisticated. This long chronology tells a powerful story of cultural endurance. It was not a flash in the pan, but a sustained effort, a tradition passed down through countless generations. How do we know this? The answers are locked in the very soil and materials of the sites themselves. Through techniques like radiocarbon dating of charcoal and bones left at the sites, and stratigraphic analysis, which studies the layers of earth like the pages of a book, researchers have pieced together detailed timelines. They have discovered that many of these sacred places were not built in one go. They were living sites used, modified, and expanded over centuries. A simple standing stone might be the centerpiece for a community for 500 years before a later generation decided to surround it with a full circle. This persistence reveals just how central these structures were to the very identity and spiritual life of the people. Their society was built around these places. As architectural knowledge grew, ideas traveled. The concept of the corbelled vault, a way of stacking stones to create a roof, might appear in a tomb in one region, and then centuries later, a refined version of the same technique shows up hundreds of miles away. These innovations spread and adapted, shaped by local beliefs and the available materials. This incredible longevity, this multi-generational project, makes the central question even more compelling. If these sites were so vital, built and maintained for 1,000 years, then who were the people who dedicated their lives to this work? The identity of the megalithic builders remains our first and most profound mystery. So who were the people behind these silent monuments? The identity of the megalithic builders stands as one of archaeology's most stubborn enigmas, a puzzle made difficult because they left behind almost no written words to tell their story. We know them almost entirely through the stones they raised. In Europe, the evidence points most strongly to Neolithic farming communities. These were people who had made the profound transition from nomadic hunter-gatherers to settled agricultural life, cultivating crops and domesticating animals. This new, more stable way of life provided the surplus food and the settled population necessary to undertake projects that could take generations to complete. Yet, this picture shifts dramatically in other parts of the world. In South America, for instance, the colossal structures often seem to be the work of complex chiefdoms or even early states, societies with more pronounced social hierarchies and centralized leadership capable of commanding vast labor forces. How can we possibly see the faces behind these stones? Modern science is beginning to provide some astonishing answers. Genetic studies analyzing ancient human remains found at these sacred sites are starting to trace their origins. This research reveals that the builders were often a mixture of local populations and migrant groups, showing a story of movement and mixing that was far more dynamic than we once thought. These were not always isolated, insular tribes. Alongside DNA, the everyday artifacts they left behind offer intimate glimpses into their world. The style of a clay pot, the wear on a flint axe, the symbolic carvings on a piece of bone, all these fragments whisper about their daily routines, their technological skill, and their spiritual beliefs. But for every clue, a dozen questions remain. Were they isolated tribal groups, each developing their own monumental traditions independently? Or were they interconnected maritime cultures, with early sailors sharing architectural ideas across vast stretches of open water? The truth likely lies somewhere in between, a complex tapestry of local innovation and long-distance inspiration. Unraveling this profound mystery forces us to pull together fragmentary clues from genetics, archaeology, and anthropology. And this search for the builders themselves inevitably leads us to an even bigger question. What kind of society did it take to organize such a breathtaking, multi-generational effort? The sheer scale of these projects demands a deeper look into the societies that orchestrated them. Coordinating the movement of 100-ton stones required more than just muscle. It demanded a social engine capable of planning for decades and motivating thousands. The evidence points away from simple, egalitarian tribes and toward communities with remarkable organizational depth. They almost certainly possessed some form of leadership, whether charismatic chieftains who could command labor, spiritual priests who interpreted the will of the gods, or councils of elders who made decisions for the collective good. This hierarchy was not necessarily oppressive. It could have been a functional structure built on respect and a shared, sacred purpose. Imagine the immense logistics. First, you need to feed everyone. A stable agricultural surplus was the absolute foundation, freeing people from the daily hunt and allowing them to work on a monument for months or even years. Then you need to manage the workforce itself. Quarrying a single massive block required a team of skilled stoneworkers. Transporting it across miles of rough terrain demanded hundreds of people pulling in unison, guided by overseers. And finally, the terrifyingly precise act of raising that stone into its final position needed every single person to follow a single, carefully rehearsed plan. This was not chaotic, disorganized labor. This was a society operating like a single, well-oiled machine. The rhythm of this work was likely tied to the land itself. Construction probably surged during the quieter seasons of the agricultural calendar, after the harvest was in, and the community could come together for a great communal project that doubled as a social and religious event. This intricate dance of labor, logistics, and seasonal timing reveals a complex social contract, a shared understanding that by working together today, they were building something eternal for their descendants. They were not primitive, they were pioneers of large-scale human collaboration. This profound level of organization naturally leads us to a more tangible question. With their society so perfectly arranged for the task, what specific tools and ingenious methods did they use to turn their vision into stone? But how do you begin to wrestle a mountain into submission? The first step in this monumental process was quarrying, the art of extracting colossal blocks from the living bedrock using nothing more than stone, bone, and fire. Without metal tools, these builders relied on a profound understanding of the stone itself. They would use heavy stone hammers, often just large, rounded river cobbles, to pound relentlessly along a natural fracture line in the granite or sandstone. For finer work, they employed picks made from the sturdy antlers of deer, using the pointed tines to gouge and pry. One of their most ingenious methods was fire setting. They would build a hot fire directly against the rock face, heating the stone until it was nearly glowing. Then they would douse it with cold water. The sudden, violent change in temperature created a thermal shock, causing the rock to crack and split along controlled lines. You can still see the evidence of this today. At the ancient quarries in Aswan, Egypt, an enormous unfinished obelisk remains partly attached to the bedrock, abandoned after a crack appeared. The surrounding stone is scarred with the unmistakable marks of stone hammers and the channels cut for fire setting, a frozen moment in a multi-year extraction process. This was not a haphazard operation. The builders demonstrated a deep geological wisdom, deliberately selecting specific types of stone for their projects, sometimes traveling great distances to acquire the perfect material. They knew which sandstone was easiest to work, which granite would best withstand the centuries, and which limestone held the finest carvings. This specialized knowledge was not written in any manual. It was a living tradition, passed down from master to apprentice over countless generations, refined through endless trial and error. The sheer resourcefulness displayed in these quarries is staggering, a testament to human adaptability. Yet, extracting the stone was only half the battle. Once a 50-ton block was successfully freed from the earth, an even more daunting challenge began: moving it. Moving a 50-ton block of stone across miles of rugged terrain is a puzzle that has captivated modern engineers for centuries. How did they do it without wheels or pack animals? The most widely supported theory involves a combination of simple machines and immense human coordination. Imagine a massive wooden sledge, a robust platform resting not on wheels but on a track of greased logs. Teams of workers would have hauled on ropes, pulling the sledge forward while others constantly moved the rear logs to the front, creating a continuous rolling path. Experimental archaeologists have proven this method works, successfully moving Stonehenge-sized stones with teams of just 150 people. The key was reducing friction, and they mastered it, possibly using animal fat or water as a lubricant on the wooden tracks. But what about crossing rivers or moving along coastlines? Here, the builders may have turned nature itself into an ally. Some researchers propose that in northern Europe, early builders could have used remnants of Ice Age glaciers as natural slipways, sliding stones across frozen landscapes. For coastal sites, the most logical solution was water transport. Large, buoyant rafts made of logs or reed boats could have been used to float stones along rivers or even across short sea channels, a theory supported by the coastal location of many megalithic quarries. The most dramatic example of ingenuity might come from Easter Island. There, local oral tradition and modern experiments suggest the famous Moai statues were not dragged horizontally but walked upright. Teams of people used a complex system of ropes to rock the statue from side to side, inching it forward in a slow, deliberate, and seemingly impossible gait. This was not brute force, it was applied physics. Every one of these methods required a deep, intuitive understanding of leverage, friction, and center of gravity. They knew how to manipulate mass and energy in ways we are only just rediscovering through painstaking experimentation. This diversity of solutions reveals a core truth about the megalithic builders: they were not bound by a single manual. They were ultimate pragmatists, observing their environment and innovating with whatever materials were at hand. Whether on a slick log track, a floating raft, or a rocky slope, they possessed a logistical genius that turned the impossible into a communal achievement. But freeing and moving the stone was only the prelude. The final, most perilous act awaited: raising these colossal weights into their permanent, upright positions. The final and most dangerous step was raising these multi-ton stones into their permanent, upright positions. This was a moment of truth where months of labor could be lost in a single, catastrophic slip. The builders employed a stunning blend of brute force and delicate precision, using simple but brilliant engineering. For the massive uprights at a site like Stonehenge, they likely constructed great earthen ramps. Workers would have dragged the stone up a sloping mound of earth and rubble, a slow, grueling process of inches. Once the stone was poised over its prepared hole, they could have used a system of levers and wooden fulcrums to painstakingly tip it upright, guided by ropes to control its descent into the waiting socket. For even heavier lintels, the stones that sit across the top, they may have built the ramp even higher, creating a stage to slide the horizontal block into place. The evidence for these techniques is etched into the landscape itself. Archaeologists find the remnants of these ramps and the post holes that once anchored stabilizing timbers. But their genius did not stop at simply standing the stones up. They locked them together. The Great Trilithon at Stonehenge is a masterclass in ancient joinery. The tops of the upright stones were carved with rounded tenons like giant stone knobs. The lintels that rested upon them had matching hollows called mortises carved into their undersides. This tongue and groove system, a technique familiar to any carpenter, created an incredibly stable interlock that has withstood millennia of wind and weather. This was not rough construction, it was fine craftsmanship on a colossal scale. Such precision implies something even more profound. To achieve this consistency across hundreds of stones, the builders must have used standardized units of measurement. They likely worked with a fixed unit, a megalithic yard or something similar, using knotted cords or calibrated wooden rods to ensure every stone from every quarry would fit perfectly into the grand design. This points to a society that had moved beyond basic counting and into the realms of practical geometry and early mathematics. They were not just monument builders, they were the engineers of the ancient world. Yet all this mechanical brilliance served a higher purpose, one written in the sky itself. The placement of these stones was often as precise as their joinery. Many megaliths are aligned with celestial events, capturing the sun's rays on the solstice or framing the moon at its most extreme rising point. Achieving these alignments required generations of patient astronomical observation and sophisticated surveying skills to transcribe those celestial patterns onto the land. The combination of such raw power and such delicate precision is what makes their engineering so breathtaking. Why would a society pour so much collective effort, so much ingenuity, into aligning tons of stone with the heavens? The answer lies not in the mechanics of how they built, but in the powerful beliefs that drove them to do it. Why would a society pour generations of effort into moving mountains of stone? The answer lies not in the mechanics of construction, but in the profound spiritual and cultural forces that drove them. These monuments were far more than simple buildings. They were the beating heart of a community's identity, serving as tombs, temples, territorial markers, and celestial calendars all at once. At Newgrange in Ireland, the entire structure is a testament to this multi-layered purpose. It is a massive tomb, a resting place for the honored dead, yet its entrance is a precise astronomical instrument designed to capture the life-giving rays of the winter solstice sun. This single alignment connects the realm of the ancestors with the power of the heavens, suggesting a ceremony that tied the community to the cosmic cycles of death and rebirth. The incredible investment of labor and resources into these non-utilitarian structures reveals a society that prioritized symbolic and religious expression over immediate practical needs. Building a megalith was an act of faith, a declaration that some things, like honoring the gods or ensuring a good harvest, were more important than daily comfort. We find further proof of this ceremonial life in the artifacts left behind. Carved spirals and symbols etched into the stones, deposits of fine pottery, animal bones from feasts, and even the remains of the people themselves all point to these sites as stages for powerful rituals. These were places where the community gathered to mark the turning of the seasons, to plead with deities for rain and sun, and to commune with their ancestors, reinforcing a shared belief in a cycle where death was not an end, but a transition. This deep spiritual connection served a crucial social function. The shared labor of building a monument and the shared experience of worshipping at it would have forged a powerful collective identity, uniting scattered families into a coherent tribe or chiefdom. It also likely legitimized the authority of emerging leaders, whether priests or chieftains, who could claim a special connection to the divine forces that governed their world. To see these stones as mere rock is to miss their true meaning. They are the physical manifestation of human aspiration, a desperate and beautiful attempt to reach beyond the mundane and touch the eternal. And to achieve such perfect alignments with the cosmos, these builders had to possess a knowledge of the skies that was both vast and meticulously precise. The stones themselves are a library of the sky. Across continents and cultures, the megalithic builders consistently oriented their monuments with the sun, moon, and stars, embedding a sophisticated celestial calendar directly into the landscape. At Measho in Scotland, the long, dark entrance passage acts as a perfect telescope. For a few days around the winter solstice, the setting sun aligns with this corridor, its last rays reaching deep into the burial chamber to illuminate the inner darkness with a profound symbolic light. Meanwhile, the thousands of standing stones at Karnak in France are not arranged randomly. Their sprawling lines appear to chart the complex 18.6-year cycle of the moon, marking its most extreme rising and setting points on the horizon. This was not casual stargazing, it was a systematic, multi-generational project of observation. How did they achieve this precision without any advanced instruments? They used the world itself as their observatory. A simple wooden pole called a gnomon could be used to track the sun's shifting shadow throughout the year. By marking the tip of the shadow at noon each day, they could map the sun's path, identifying the longest and shortest days, the solstices, which became the anchors of their calendar. This knowledge was power. For an agricultural society, predicting the solstices meant knowing precisely when to plant and when to harvest, turning abstract astronomy into food security and community survival. Yet the purpose ran far deeper than the practical. By building a temple that physically captured the solstice light, they were forging a tangible link between their world and the cosmos. They were demonstrating that the cycles of human life, of death and rebirth mirrored in their tombs, were part of a grand universal order. This worldview, where heaven and earth were intimately connected, is what gave these sites their immense spiritual gravity. Some researchers believe the most complex alignments encoded sacred stories or creation myths, a form of knowledge so vital it was literally set in stone and passed down through oral traditions for centuries. The architecture itself became a physical representation of their cosmology, a permanent reminder that humanity was not separate from, but a participant in, the great dance of the cosmos. This profound integration of science and spirit is not just written in the arrangement of the stones, but often carved directly onto their surfaces. Etched into the cold stone, a silent language of spirals and zigzags awaits translation. These carvings are the personal signatures of the megalithic builders, a visual poetry that gives us a fleeting glimpse into their minds. At the passage tomb of Gavrinis in Brittany, the interior walls are a breathtaking tapestry of stone, covered from floor to ceiling in intricate patterns of concentric arcs and swirling motifs. To stand inside that chamber is to be surrounded by a whirlwind of stone, a deliberate and overwhelming artistic expression. What were these symbols meant to convey? Some researchers suggest they represent deities or powerful ancestral spirits watching over the tomb. Others see them as maps of the cosmos itself, charting the movement of celestial bodies or the journey of the soul into an afterlife. The recurring spiral, a motif found from Ireland to the Mediterranean, could symbolize the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, or perhaps the labyrinthine path to the underworld. These were not mere decorations, they were likely functional. In a world without writing, such symbols could have acted as powerful mnemonic devices, triggering the recitation of long oral histories and creation myths during ceremonies. They might also have served as protective charms, warding off evil spirits from sacred spaces. The style of this art tells its own story of cultural evolution. In some regions, we see purely abstract geometric designs, a focus on order and pattern. In others, more figurative forms emerge, like the famous stylized axes and boats carved at sites in Scandinavia, hinting at the practical and spiritual items that held power in their world. This variation shows that each community was adapting a shared visual language to express its own local identity and beliefs. Decoding this art is profoundly challenging, as we are trying to read a book whose key has been lost for millennia. Yet, by carefully comparing these ancient symbols with the mythologies of later cultures and studying the symbolic practices of traditional societies today, we can begin to piece together fragments of their meaning. This visual language transforms a monolithic block from a simple piece of architecture into a narrative object, a stone page from a forgotten story. And often, that story was intimately connected to the final journey of a human life, leading us directly to the most personal function of these monuments, their role as tombs and memorials for the dead. These silent stone chambers were far more than just graves. They were houses for the ancestors. The most common of these funerary structures is the dolmen, a stark and powerful form found across Europe and Asia. Picture a massive flat capstone weighing tons, balanced impossibly on 3 or more upright stones, creating a stone table that sheltered the dead within. Then there are the passage graves, like the Great Mound of Newgrange, where a long, narrow corridor leads deep into an artificial hill, ending in a central chamber. Finally, the cairn, a simple yet monumental pile of stones heaped over a burial, marking a sacred spot in the landscape. Inside these tombs, archaeologists find more than just silent bones. They uncover the tangible evidence of a continuing bond between the generations. Carefully placed beside the remains are grave goods, personal treasures meant for the journey beyond. A finely polished stone axe speaks of a person's status and power. A beautifully decorated pot might have held offerings of food or drink for the spirit. These objects were not casually discarded. They were chosen with intention, reflecting a belief that death was a transition to another state of being, one where the deceased would still need their tools, their ornaments, and the sustenance provided by their living descendants. This relationship was not a one-time event. The evidence shows that these tombs were revisited again and again over centuries. New bodies were added, sometimes rearranging the older bones to make space. Ritual feasts were held at the entrance, with animal bones and broken pottery left as testimony to communal meals shared with the ancestors. This was not a culture that buried its dead and forgot them. It was a culture in constant dialogue with them. The immense effort required to build a dolmen or a passage tomb, moving stones that could weigh 20 tons or more, reveals just how central this ancestor veneration was to their entire society. It was the glue that held the community together. By honoring the same ancestors in the same place, a scattered population of farmers could forge a shared identity, a collective memory that reinforced their claim to the land and their place in the cosmic order. This connection to the cosmos was often built into the tomb's very design. The orientation of a passage grave was frequently deliberate, aligning its entrance with the rising sun on a solstice or the moon at its most extreme point. This alignment transformed the tomb from a simple house of the dead into a symbolic gateway. The journey down the dark passage into the central chamber mirrored the soul's journey into the afterlife, a journey that was now directly connected to the eternal cycles of the heavens. The light of the sun piercing the darkness on that one special day was not just a spectacle, it was a reaffirmation of life conquering death, a divine signal that the cycle of rebirth was intact. This profound layering of meaning, accumulated over hundreds of years of use, made these sites the enduring hearts of the landscape. A tomb started by a great-grandfather became the responsibility of his great-grandchildren, a permanent anchor for a community's story. To understand how these cultures conceptualized death is to understand that they saw it not as an end, but as a transformation, and that the memory of the ancestors was an active, living force that shaped their world. And just as these tombs were centers for remembrance, they were also the stage for the community's most vital ceremonies, where the living gathered to reaffirm the bonds that held their world together. The stones did not only honor the dead, they pulsed with the lives of the living. Beyond their roles as tombs and calendars, many megalithic sites functioned as great ceremonial centers, the ancient equivalent of cathedrals, town squares, and festival grounds all rolled into one. Imagine the great earthworks and stone circles of Avebury in England, a vast henge so large an entire village now sits within its embrace. This was not a private space, but a public arena designed to host massive crowds. The evidence for this vibrant social life is etched into the soil itself. Archaeologists sifting through the layers at sites like the Maltese temples find thick deposits of animal bones, the remains of great feasts where entire communities shared in the bounty. Scattered amongst them are shards of fine pottery and other artifacts, perhaps offerings or the personal belongings of participants. These were not silent, somber places, but the stages for rituals filled with music, rhythmic dance, and communal celebration. The very layout of these centers was engineered to shape the human experience. Long processional avenues, like the West Kennet Avenue leading to Avebury, channeled the flow of people, creating a sense of anticipation and directing movement towards the sacred core. Enclosed spaces within the larger complex would have created areas for more exclusive or intense rituals, separating the initiates from the general population, the leaders from the followers. This careful choreography of space was designed to manipulate sensory experience, building from the open, crowded procession to the focused, intimate ceremony. The social functions of these gatherings were as vital as the spiritual ones. In a world without written laws or central governments, these periodic festivals were essential for maintaining the social fabric. They provided a neutral ground where scattered clans could come together, reinforce alliances, and resolve disputes under the watchful eyes of the gods and ancestors. A successful harvest festival would have celebrated collective achievement, while initiation rites would have formally integrated the young into the adult community, transferring knowledge and responsibility. These events also served to legitimize and display social hierarchies, with emerging elites presiding over the ceremonies and distributing the feast, solidifying their status through ritual and generosity. This seamless integration of the practical and the spiritual made these centers the enduring hearts of the landscape. Their power was so profound that many, like the Great Mound of Tara in Ireland, remained important pilgrimage and royal sites for thousands of years, their original megalithic purpose absorbed and reimagined by later cultures. To see these sites only as silent monuments is to miss their true nature. they were once dynamic social hubs where a culture celebrated, negotiated, and renewed itself. This level of organization and the presence of non-local artifacts at these sites point to a world far more connected than we often assume, revealing intriguing evidence of trade and cultural exchange across the megalithic world. The stones themselves tell a story of journeys. Far from being isolated, the megalithic world was stitched together by extensive trade networks, moving not just goods, but ideas across vast distances. The most famous example is the blue stones of Stonehenge. These distinctive spotted dolerite rocks were not quarried locally, but were dragged overland and possibly floated on rivers from the Preseli Hills in Wales, a journey of over 150 miles. This was not a practical choice for simple construction material. It was a deliberate, sacred endeavor. The stones themselves were likely considered to hold inherent power, their distant origin adding to their spiritual significance. This implies a shared cultural landscape, where certain places and materials were recognized as sacred across different regions, and where communities had the social connections to negotiate safe passage for these colossal treasures through foreign territories. We see this pattern repeated across the continent. In the Mediterranean, the distinctive honey-colored limestone used in the Maltese temples was sourced from specific quarries across the islands, requiring coordinated transport by sea. The presence of seashells from distant coasts and rare stones like jadate for polished axes in northern European tombs confirms that these networks moved both practical and prestige items. How do we know this so definitively? Modern science provides the proof. Through techniques like X-ray fluorescence and neutron activation analysis, archaeologists can perform a chemical fingerprint on an artifact. They can take a simple clay pot found in a tomb in France and trace its precise composition back to a specific clay bed in Spain. This tells us that the pot, and likely the person who brought it, traveled hundreds of miles. This was not random wandering, it was organized trade. These routes became the information highways of the ancient world. Along with shells and stone axes, people carried stories, architectural concepts, and symbolic knowledge. This is why we see such striking similarities in styles across vast areas. The trilithon structure, that simple but powerful form of two uprights and a horizontal lintel, appears from the temples of Malta to the stone circles of Britain. It is a foundational architectural idea that seems to have spread, adapted, and been adopted by different cultures. The same goes for artistic motifs like the spiral, which emerges independently in some places, but in others appears to have been carried along coastal trade routes, a visual idea passed from one community to the next. This constant, low-level exchange of goods and ideas would have prevented cultural stagnation. A new technique for polishing stone, a more efficient way to shape a monolith, or a powerful new symbol for the afterlife could travel along these networks, enriching local traditions and accelerating innovation. This interconnected reality completely shatters the old image of isolated, primitive tribes, each struggling alone. It reveals a dynamic and surprisingly globalized Neolithic world, where relationships stretched across horizons. The very survival and flourishing of these cultures depended on this web of connection, which makes their eventual disappearance all the more perplexing. What could possibly cause such a widespread and resilient network to falter and fade away? For centuries, we envisioned these builders as a society of men, but the stones are starting to tell a different story. Recent archaeological discoveries are fundamentally reshaping our understanding of gender roles within megalithic communities, revealing a social landscape far more complex and equitable than we once assumed. The most compelling evidence comes directly from the tombs themselves. In the Iberian Peninsula, Careful analysis of burials within dolmens has uncovered women interred with spectacular grave goods that speak of immense prestige. One woman was found buried with a magnificent polished stone axe, a classic symbol of authority and leadership. Another was laid to rest alongside a collection of finely crafted blades and ornaments made from exotic materials, items that would have required extensive trade networks to acquire. These were not the burials of passive figures, but of individuals who held significant social power, perhaps as clan leaders, respected healers, or spiritual specialists guiding the community's rituals. This physical evidence directly challenges the outdated notion that these were purely patriarchal, male-dominated societies. The symbolic world of these cultures further reinforces this revised view. Across Europe, small but powerful clay and stone figurines have been discovered, often depicting stylized female forms with exaggerated features, while earlier interpretations hastily labeled these as fertility goddesses. Modern scholars see a wider range of possibilities. They could represent specific, venerated ancestral matriarchs, mythical founders of a lineage, or even embodiments of the life-giving and life-taking forces of nature itself. These icons suggest that the feminine principle held a central and respected place in their cosmology. When we combine this with the evidence from the graves, a new picture emerges, one of a society where status was likely earned through one's contributions and spiritual connection, not automatically assigned by gender. It is entirely plausible that women were instrumental in the very construction of these monuments, not just as supporting labor, but as organizers and planners who helped coordinate the massive logistical operations. Their knowledge of agriculture would have been essential for producing the food surplus that fed the work crews, and their roles in spiritual life would have provided the ideological drive for the entire endeavor. This more nuanced understanding does more than just add women to the historical narrative. It transforms our entire perception of megalithic social structures. We move away from a simplistic model of brute force led solely by men, and toward a vision of a collaborative society that leveraged the skills and wisdom of all its members. This was a world where power and influence could flow through many channels. As we integrate these human insights, our focus naturally expands to the world these people inhabited, the very land and climate that both challenged and sustained their monumental ambitions. The landscape itself was a sacred blueprint. These ancient builders did not simply drop their monuments onto empty plains. They wove them into the very fabric of the earth, choosing locations that resonated with power and meaning. A stone circle might crown a hilltop, visible for miles as a symbol of a community's presence. A solitary menhir could be placed beside a spring, marking a life-giving water source as a gift from the gods. The placement was a dialogue with nature designed for maximum impact. In the dramatic valleys of Portugal, standing stones were positioned to frame the rising sun as it cleared a specific mountain peak, turning a celestial event into a localized terrestrial spectacle. This was about more than just aesthetics. It was about creating a stage where the human and the divine could meet. The choice of material was equally intentional. On the Orkney Islands, the builders used the local old red sandstone, a rock that weathers to a deep, rusty hue. The monuments they built, like the village of Skara Brae and the nearby stone circles, do not stand out starkly against the landscape. They emerge from it, as if the earth itself had gently pushed them to the surface. This harmonious blending created a sense that the structures were not man-made impositions, but natural extensions of a living, spiritual world. Every practical decision was infused with symbolic weight. Building on a high ridge made a structure a territorial marker, but it also brought it closer to the sky and the storm deities. Positioning a tomb near a river connected it to concepts of flow, transition, and the journey to the afterlife. They read the land like a holy text, seeing significance in every outcrop and watercourse. This deep connection dictated their methods as well. In areas with soft, unstable soil, they would dig deeper foundation pits and pack them with rubble to prevent their monoliths from shifting. In coastal regions battered by wind, they might orient a passage grave away from the prevailing storms to protect its interior. Their engineering was a direct response to environmental challenges, a testament to their resilience and adaptability. This symbiotic relationship reveals a world view where humanity was not separate from nature, but an integrated participant in a vast, animated cosmos. The stones were the anchors that held this belief in place, and within some of these stone anchors, researchers have uncovered another layer of this ancient dialogue, a hidden dimension of sound that may have been as important as sight in their rituals. The stones themselves can sing. Deep within the subterranean labyrinth of the hypogeum of Hal Saflieni in Malta, a chamber known as the Oracle Room holds a remarkable secret. If a person speaks in a deep voice within this small, oval space, the sound does not just echo, it resonates, creating a powerful vibration that seems to pulse through the very stone and through the bones of anyone standing there. This is not an accidental feature. Recent acoustic studies have shown that many megalithic sites were engineered to manipulate sound in profound ways. The massive, dense stones used in their construction and the specific shapes of the chambers and corridors create unique sonic environments. A simple drumbeat in one of these spaces could be transformed into a thunderous, enveloping rhythm, while a chant might reverberate for seconds, layering upon itself to create a hypnotic chorus. The builders demonstrated a sophisticated, if intuitive, grasp of sound physics, likely developed through generations of trial and error, selecting certain rock types for their resonant qualities and carving chambers to specific proportions to enhance these effects. This auditory dimension suggests these sites were designed as fully immersive sensory environments. During rituals, the combination of flickering firelight, rhythmic movement, and these overpowering sonic vibrations could have profoundly affected human consciousness. The constant, low-frequency resonance can be physically felt in the chest and can lead to disorientation, a sense of timelessness, or even visions. For the participants, this would not have been merely a special effect, it was likely a direct pathway to the divine. The sound itself may have been perceived as the voice of an ancestor or a deity, a tangible force that bridged the gap between the human and spirit worlds. This shared, overwhelming experience would have forged an incredible bond within the community, uniting everyone present through a powerful, collective sensory and emotional event. The very architecture was a tool for transcendence. This purposeful design extends beyond ceremony into the realm of personal well-being, pointing to evidence that these powerful places were also sought out for their perceived healing properties. The stones offered more than just spiritual connection, they promised physical healing. Long after their original builders had vanished, many megalithic sites became renowned as places of therapeutic power, where generations of people sought cures for ailments and spiritual renewal. This enduring role is preserved in local folklore and archaeological finds, revealing a fascinating evolution in how these monuments were perceived. Across Europe, specific stones, springs, and caves associated with megalithic complexes were regarded as possessing potent curative energies. People would travel great distances to touch a particular menhir, believing it could draw out illness, or to collect water from a sacred spring nestled within a stone circle, using it to wash wounds or ease pain. At the Rollright Stones in England, a powerful legend endures that the stones themselves can heal. It was said that if a sick person pressed their body against the king's stone at midnight, their affliction would be transferred into the ancient rock. Similar traditions are found from the dolmens of Brittany to the menhirs of the Caucasus, a recurring theme of stones as conduits for earthly vitality. The evidence for these practices is often tangible. Archaeologists excavating around such stones frequently find small, personal offerings left behind as tokens of petition or gratitude. These votive deposits might include simple clay figurines representing the ailing body part, carefully woven cloth strips, or polished coins from much later periods, showing the tradition persisted for centuries. This suggests a continuous thread of belief, where the original sacred power of the place was reinterpreted through new cultural lenses but never truly forgotten. Some modern researchers have proposed a scientific basis for these age-old sensations, noting that numerous megalithic sites are located in geologically active areas. These regions can exhibit subtle magnetic anomalies or heightened levels of natural radiation, phenomena that might produce tangible physical sensations in visitors, such as a slight tingling or a feeling of warmth. While the idea that ancient builders deliberately sought out these earth energies remains highly speculative and unproven, it is intriguing to consider that the intuitive choice of a powerful location might have had a basis in a physical reality they could feel, even if they could not measure it. This therapeutic role highlights a crucial point about megaliths: their function was never static. A tomb from the Stone Age could become a healing shrine in the Bronze Age and a pilgrimage site in the medieval era. They continuously served their communities, adapting to changing human needs while retaining their core identity as places of extraordinary power. This enduring human desire for healing and connection, for a tangible link between the health of the body and the spirit of the land, is a powerful legacy written not in words but in the worn paths leading to these ancient stones. And this profound, intuitive understanding of place was matched by an equally sophisticated grasp of order and measurement, a mathematical precision that gave these sacred spaces their timeless stability. The stones are laid out with a precision that defies their age, a silent testament to a forgotten mathematics. Behind the apparent chaos of these ancient sites lies a hidden geometry, a language of circles, ellipses, and perfect right-angled triangles that reveals a mind for abstraction. This was not guesswork, it was applied science. The builders possessed a standardized unit of measurement, a consistent length they used to ensure every stone from every quarry would fit perfectly into the grand design. At Stonehenge, the arrangement of the sarsen stones is not a simple ring. It is a complex pattern of concentric circles and horseshoes whose dimensions may encode fundamental mathematical constants or the very cycles of the moon. To achieve this on such a scale required sophisticated surveying techniques. They almost certainly used simple but effective tools, like knotted ropes of a fixed length to mark out perfect circles, and wooden stakes and sighting poles to ensure straight lines and precise angles over undulating ground. How could they be so accurate without modern instruments? The answer lies in a profound, hands-on understanding of geometry, where a stretched rope becomes a giant compass and a row of stakes becomes a theodolite. This knowledge was not confined to one place. The same geometric principles, like the elegant proportions of the golden section, appear in megalithic designs from the British Isles to the Mediterranean. This recurrence points to a shared, perhaps even universal, understanding of visual harmony and sacred proportion. For these builders, mathematics was not an abstract pursuit, it was deeply practical. Knowing how to calculate a right angle using a simple 3-4-5 rope triangle ensured that a lintel would sit level and a wall would stand straight for millennia. But the purpose ran deeper than mere stability. These perfect shapes and harmonious ratios likely held profound symbolic meaning, reflecting a belief that the cosmos itself was built on a framework of mathematical order. By replicating this celestial geometry on Earth, they were creating a microcosm, a sacred space where human order mirrored the divine. Their stones were a physical expression of a cosmic blueprint. Unraveling this numerical language forces us to see these cultures not as primitive stoneworkers, but as the intellectual ancestors of geometers and astronomers. And this vast, intricate body of knowledge, this understanding of the stars and the stones, was not written down in any manual. It was carried in the most fragile of vessels, the human memory, passed from one generation to the next through the powerful, living thread of oral tradition. Their stories were not carved in stone, but carried on the breath of their descendants. Without a written language, the megalithic builders relied on the most durable of all human technologies, the spoken word, passed with meticulous care from one generation to the next. These oral traditions, later captured in the mythologies of Celtic, Norse, and countless indigenous cultures, often explain the origins of the great stones in the only terms that made sense to them. They attributed these impossible feats of engineering to giants who strode the earth, to gods who shaped the landscape with their hands, or to ancestral heroes of immense strength and wisdom. The Great Stone Circle of Callanish in Scotland, for instance, is woven into local legend as a group of giants who were turned to stone for refusing to convert to Christianity. These were not meant as literal histories, but as powerful metaphorical explanations for a past that was already ancient and mysterious to the people telling the stories. By carefully peeling back the layers of these myths, we can sometimes find indirect clues about a site's original function. A legend that associates a particular dolmen with fertility rites, where women would touch the stone to ensure a healthy childbirth, might hint at its long-forgotten role in rituals of life and creation. A story of a great battle fought where a stone row now stands could be a folk memory of a territorial conflict that the monument was built to commemorate. Comparative mythology reveals that these themes are not isolated, but form a recurring pattern across the world. The motif of a giant or a wizard engaging in a contest to hurl massive stones appears in both European and Polynesian lore, perhaps a distant echo of the communal labor and incredible effort required to move these monoliths. Another common thread is the association of stone circles with astronomical beings, like the sun or moon being trapped or dancing within the stones, a clear reflection of the celestial alignments that were so central to the site's purposes. The sheer endurance of these stories, some surviving for thousands of years before being written down, underscores their profound importance. They were the mechanism of cultural continuity, the living library that preserved a people's identity, their history, and their connection to a sacred landscape. These narratives are more than just fanciful tales. They are the lens through which later societies interpreted and valued the enigmatic works of their predecessors, ensuring that the stones never entirely lost their voice. To move from these ancient whispers to hard evidence, we must now explore the cutting-edge tools of modern science that are finally allowing the stones to speak for themselves. The silent stones are finally beginning to speak, their secrets unlocked by the gentle touch of modern science. We no longer need to rely solely on shovels and speculation. Today, a technological renaissance is transforming our understanding of these ancient sites, using tools that see through the earth and into the very bones of the builders themselves. Light detection and ranging, or LiDAR, is one such marvel. By firing millions of laser pulses from an aircraft, it can strip away dense forest canopy or layers of soil to reveal the ghostly impressions of long-vanished structures. Entire ceremonial landscapes, complete with unknown earthworks and processional paths, have been mapped in places like the British Isles, rewriting our maps of the prehistoric world without a single trench being dug. Similarly, ground-penetrating radar sends electromagnetic waves into the soil, painting a picture of what lies beneath by reading the reflections. It can pinpoint buried stones, hidden chambers, and even ancient post holes, guiding archaeologists directly to the most promising areas for excavation and preserving the integrity of the rest. This non-invasive approach is crucial, ensuring that these fragile sites remain intact for future generations to study with even more advanced tools. The revolution continues at the microscopic level. Isotopic analysis of human remains provides an intimate biography written in bone and tooth enamel. The food you eat and the water you drink leave a distinct chemical signature. By studying the isotopes in a skeleton from a passage grave, scientists can determine if that person grew up on a diet of fish from the coast or grains from the inland plains, tracing their lifetime movements across the landscape. This reveals that these communities were far more mobile than we ever imagined. DNA analysis adds another profound layer, tracing genetic lineages and connections. We can now see the flow of people across Europe, confirming that the spread of megalithic ideas was often accompanied by the migration of specific ancestral groups, a story of movement and mixing written in ancient genes. These scientific methods are not used in isolation. The most exciting discoveries happen at the intersection of disciplines, where archaeologists, geologists, and anthropologists collaborate. A geologist can identify the precise quarry a stone came from, while an anthropologist interprets the social implications of moving it 100 miles. This multidisciplinary approach is powerfully illustrated at Göbekli Tepe. There, researchers have employed high-resolution 3D modeling to digitally deconstruct and rebuild the entire site. This virtual reconstruction has allowed them to visualize the complex sequence of construction, showing how the older, larger rings were deliberately buried and then built over with newer, smaller structures. This challenges the old idea of a single, sudden construction event, replacing it with a dynamic story of a site that was used, modified, and ritually closed over many centuries. These technological tools are unlocking secrets that were utterly inaccessible just decades ago, fueling a golden age of discovery. Each new scan, each new genetic sequence, provides another piece of the puzzle, forcing us to reassess long-held theories and question what we thought we knew. This scientific progress gives us the clearest picture yet, but it also equips us to look back with a more critical eye. With this new evidence in hand, we can now turn to the grand, sweeping explanations of the past and ask where they succeeded and where they spectacularly failed. The allure of the unknown inevitably births legends, and the megaliths have attracted more than their share. From tales of extraterrestrial architects to theories of them being ancient power plants or cosmic computers, these narratives capture the imagination but crumble under scientific scrutiny. The persistent idea that humans alone could not have built these structures fundamentally underestimates the power of organized communal effort and simple physics. We have seen through experimental archaeology that teams of people using nothing but ropes, wooden sledges, and earthen ramps can move and raise stones weighing tens of tons. The so-called mystery of their strength evaporates when you replace a single giant with hundreds of coordinated individuals. Claims of a global energy grid connecting these sites through ley lines often rely on drawing straight lines between points on a map, while ignoring the countless other sites that do not fit the pattern. What appears to be a mysterious alignment is often a coincidence, or a natural result of building on prominent geographical features like hilltops and ridges, which themselves follow geological fault lines. While the spiritual significance these places held is undeniable, there is no empirical evidence they functioned as technological devices. Attributing them to lost civilizations or visitors from other stars, though thrilling, ultimately strips the actual builders of their credit. It is a form of cultural appropriation that dismisses the immense intellectual and physical labor of our ancestors, suggesting their achievements were only possible with outside help. This does a profound disservice to the ingenuity of Neolithic societies. By clearing away these sensational myths, we can focus on the far more compelling truth that ordinary people accomplished extraordinary things through knowledge, cooperation, and perseverance. This evidence-based perspective is essential, for it equips us to confront the very real and documented challenges these cultures ultimately faced, challenges rooted not in fantasy, but in the changing climate of their world. Even the most stable societies are at the mercy of the sky. Climatic shifts during the Holocene epoch, particularly a severe global event around 4,200 years ago, brought droughts and cooling that may have unraveled the very fabric of megalithic life. This period, known as the 4.2 kiloyear event, was not a single catastrophe but a prolonged crisis that stretched for centuries, testing the resilience of communities built around stone and ceremony. The foundation of their society was agriculture, a delicate balance of sun and rain. When that balance failed, the consequences were immediate and devastating. Prolonged drought would have withered crops, while unexpected cooling shortened growing seasons, leading to repeated harvest failures and crippling food shortages. How does a culture feed the hundreds of workers needed to haul a 50-ton monolith when it cannot even feed its own children? The immense communal projects that once defined their identity and united their people would have quickly become an unaffordable luxury. Resources once dedicated to quarrying and construction were suddenly needed for sheer survival, forcing a painful shift in priorities. In the Sahara, a once greener landscape began its rapid transformation into the desert we know today. This process of desertification did not just make life difficult, it made it impossible, forcing entire populations to abandon their ancestral lands and the stone circles that anchored them. These were not casual relocations, but desperate migrations that shattered cultural continuity. The oral traditions, the specialized stone working skills, the precise astronomical knowledge, all of it was vulnerable when communities were scattered in a fight for survival. We know this not from guesswork, but from the hard data of paleoclimatology. Scientists drill deep into ice sheets and lake beds, extracting core samples that act as a climate diary stretching back thousands of years. The layers of ice and sediment preserve bubbles of ancient air and traces of pollen, telling a story of shifting temperatures and rainfall patterns. When we align this climatic data with the archaeological record, the correlations are striking. The timeline for the decline in megalith construction in many regions shows a worrying synchronicity with periods of intense environmental stress, yet causation is never simple. A drought did not directly topple a standing stone. Instead, it triggered a chain reaction of social consequences. Food scarcity breeds competition, which can lead to internal conflict, challenging the authority of the priests and chieftains who organized the great building projects. It can force populations to migrate, bringing them into conflict with neighboring groups over dwindling fertile land. The society that was once a well-oiled machine of cooperation could fracture under the strain of hunger and uncertainty. This environmental perspective does not diminish the achievements of the megalithic builders. Rather, it deepens our respect for their resilience. They were not passive victims of nature, but active participants in a constant struggle for adaptation. Some communities may have shifted their focus from massive stone circles to more modest, practical structures. Others may have merged with different groups, their traditions blending and transforming into something new. Their story is a powerful reminder that no civilization, no matter how grand its monuments, is entirely separate from the natural world that sustains it. The pressure of a changing climate often forced a more brutal kind of adaptation, one where cooperation gave way to competition, and the stones themselves became witnesses to a struggle for resources. The romantic image of a perfectly harmonious megalithic world is a comforting one, but the bones and stones tell a more complex story. Evidence is mounting that these societies knew conflict and competition as intimately as they knew cooperation. In the Scottish Highlands, the dramatic placement of a stone circle on a high ridge was not just for celestial observation. It was a statement of territorial control, a visible claim over the valley below that could be seen for miles by any potential rival. Nearby, the remains of fortified hilltops, their earthworks and palisades dating to the same era, speak clearly of a need for defense. These were not built out of paranoia, but in response to real threats. The human remains from this period provide the most chilling testimony. Skeletons unearthed from collective tombs sometimes show the unhealed marks of violence, a flint arrowhead embedded in a spine, or a skull fractured by a crushing blow from a stone axe. These are not the quiet deaths of old age, but the brutal evidence of raids and warfare. In some cases, the discovery of what appear to be trophy skulls suggests that conflict was not just about resources, but was woven into the ritual and symbolic life of the people, a way to demonstrate power and dominance over a defeated enemy. Even the monuments themselves could be weapons in a social arms race. The drive to build bigger, more impressive, and more elaborate structures than a neighboring group would have been a powerful form of competition. Erecting a colossal dolmen or a towering stone circle was a public display of a community's wealth, its organizational capacity, and the size of its labor force. It was a declaration that said, "Our leaders are powerful, our gods are strong, and we command this land." This competitive pressure could have been a potent engine for innovation, pushing builders to develop new techniques for moving heavier stones or creating more complex architectural forms to outshine their rivals. Yet, this constant one-upmanship also carried a heavy cost, diverting vast resources and potentially creating internal social strains between the elites who commanded the projects and the laborers who provided the muscle. Acknowledging this shadow of conflict does not diminish their achievements, it simply makes them more human. It reveals societies navigating the same tensions between unity and division, cooperation and competition that have shaped human history from its beginning. This nuanced reality, a blend of spiritual aspiration and earthly struggle, is precisely what made their cultural legacy so resilient, allowing it to be absorbed and transformed by the civilizations that followed. The stones did not fall silent with their builders. Their legacy was far too powerful to simply vanish, its echoes reverberating through the centuries, reshaping the very architecture of power and spirit in the classical and medieval worlds. The Greeks, masters of marble and myth, did not invent their magnificent tholoi tombs from nothing. These elegant, beehive-shaped structures, like the famed treasury of Atreus, share a profound spiritual DNA with the older passage graves of the Mediterranean, reimagining the journey to the underworld with a new, sophisticated grace. Later still, the practical Romans adopted the megalithic principle of permanence for their own elite. The massive, circular stone mausoleums built for emperors like Augustus were not just tombs, they were statements of enduring power, direct descendants of the ancestral mounds that once dotted the European landscape. Even the mythology of the Druids is deeply entangled with this ancient past. While the stone circles of Britain were already thousands of years old when Druidic practices were recorded, these later spiritual leaders saw the power in these places and adopted them as their own sacred spaces, weaving new rituals around the old, silent stones. This was not a loss of knowledge, but a transformation. The symbolic weight of a massive stone as a marker of territory, sanctity, and memory proved incredibly durable. In the Baltic region, we see a clear, unbroken thread. The tradition of building stone-setted graves for the community, so prominent in the megalithic era, slowly evolved through the Bronze Age and into the Iron Age, with the styles of the cairns and the grave goods changing, but the fundamental act of honoring the dead within a ring of stones remaining a cultural constant for millennia. This continuity is crucial. It shatters the illusion of a dark age between prehistory and history. It shows us that ancient innovations were never truly lost. They were simply adapted, reinvented, and folded into the fabric of new beliefs. The megaliths were not a dead end, but a foundation. They established an architectural language of the sacred that later cultures instinctively understood and built upon, creating a bridge across time that connects the earliest farmers to the emperors of Rome. This grand story of cultural inheritance, however, is built from countless individual lives. To cross that bridge ourselves, we must now move from the monuments to the people and listen to the personal stories now being told by their very bones. Our understanding of these ancient people is now being rewritten at the most fundamental level within their very cells. Genetic analysis of skeletal remains from megalithic tombs is opening a direct window into the lives of the builders, revealing a story of movement and mixing that was far more complex than we ever imagined. Across Europe, the DNA tells a consistent tale of three great ancestral streams converging. The earliest builders often show a strong genetic signature from Anatolian farmers, people who brought agriculture into Europe. But woven into that genetic fabric are the distinct threads of local Western European hunter-gatherers, and later, a powerful influx of pastoralist peoples from the Pontic-Caspian steppe. This was not a static, isolated population, but a dynamic and evolving one. Consider the evidence from the great Iberian megaliths. Studies show that the individuals buried in the oldest chambers were overwhelmingly descended from those early Neolithic farmers. Yet, in later burials within the very same tombs, we find the clear genetic markers of the steppe pastoralists. This reveals a profound social process unfolding over centuries. New people were arriving, but rather than displacing the existing culture, they were being integrated into it, buried alongside the original builders in their most sacred ancestral spaces. This genetic tapestry provides incredible insights into their social organization. At some sites, the individuals interred together over generations share close familial bonds, suggesting that the labor to build and maintain these monuments was organized along kinship lines. A single tomb might be the project of a specific clan, with the work and the sacred duty passed down from parent to child for hundreds of years. We can even glimpse their personal struggles. Analysis of their DNA can reveal genetic predispositions to certain diseases or physical traits like lactose tolerance, which tells us when dairy became a stable part of their diet. These are no longer anonymous skeletons. They are becoming individuals with health histories and family trees. This biological evidence works in powerful concert with the archaeology. The discovery of a non-local pot in a tomb was always intriguing, but now, when we find that the person buried with that pot also carries genetic ancestry from a distant region, the story comes alive. We can trace not just the movement of objects, but the movement of people. This intimate connection to our shared human past is profound, yet it forces upon us a critical and respectful question. Who has the right to tell their story, and how do we honor the legacy of the very people we seek to understand? The bones unearthed from a sacred tomb are more than just data. They are the ancestors of someone. Modern archaeology is grappling with this profound ethical truth, moving from a practice of simple excavation to one of deep responsibility. The field is now confronting difficult questions about who has the right to speak for the ancient dead and how to balance scientific curiosity with cultural respect. For many indigenous communities around the world, these monuments are not abandoned relics. They are living parts of their spiritual landscape, places where their own ancestral memories are deeply rooted. Their advocacy has pushed researchers toward a new model of collaborative archaeology, one that seeks free and informed consent before any digging begins and actively involves community voices in interpreting the findings. This partnership transforms the work from an extraction of knowledge into a shared journey of discovery. The threats to these sites are more urgent than ever. Looters seeking artifacts for the illegal antiquities trade leave behind shattered trenches and stolen history. Unmanaged tourism, with millions of visitors touching the stones at Stonehenge or climbing on delicate structures, causes gradual but irreversible erosion. Even the changing climate itself poses a danger, as rising sea levels and increased storm intensity eat away at coastal sites. In response, a clear ethical framework has emerged, prioritizing conservation over excavation. Modern guidelines insist on minimal disturbance, using non-invasive tools like ground-penetrating radar to see underground without breaking the soil. They emphasize that the primary goal is not to fill museum cases, but to protect these places for future generations, sharing the benefits of research through public education and direct engagement with local communities. This ethical shift ensures that the quest for knowledge does not come at the cost of desecration, allowing us to honor the legacy of the builders whose voices we are finally learning to hear. This careful, respectful approach to the past is perfectly complemented by a hands-on method for testing its secrets, where researchers roll up their sleeves and try to rebuild the past themselves. The proof of their ingenuity lies not just in the stones they left behind, but in our ability to replicate their work. Experimental archaeology has taken the question of how they built these monuments out of the realm of pure theory and into the physical world, where ropes strain and wooden sledges groan under the weight of stone. In the 1990s, a landmark project known as the Stonehenge experiment put these ancient methods to the test. A team of volunteers using only ropes, wooden rollers, and a large sledge successfully transported a 25-ton concrete block across the countryside. They then erected it using a simple earthen ramp and a system of levers, proving that a small, coordinated group could achieve what had long been dismissed as impossible without supernatural aid. This was not a feat of magic, but of applied physics and sheer human determination. These hands-on projects do more than just debunk wild theories. They provide a tangible sense of the scale of the endeavor. By timing each step, researchers can estimate the immense labor costs, calculating that moving a single massive sarsen stone for the real Stonehenge might have required a team of 150 people working for weeks. They uncover the practical challenges that never appear in grand theories, like the heart-stopping moment a stone begins to fracture under its own weight during transport, or the way soft, rain-soaked ground can swallow a sledge, halting all progress. Each of these problems, solved through trial and error by modern experimenters, represents a lesson hard-learned by the original builders, knowledge that was passed down and refined over generations. This empirical evidence grounds our understanding in the gritty reality of mud, sweat, and timber. It reveals the builders not as mystics, but as masterful engineers who understood their materials and their environment intimately. They knew which woods were strongest for levers, how to mix the right slurry of mud and water to lubricate a track, and precisely where to place a fulcrum for maximum leverage. This continuous cycle of experimentation offers a dynamic, ever-evolving conversation with the past, one where each successful lift or unforeseen collapse brings us closer to the minds of those who first raised these giants. And just as they used physical tools to manipulate stone, they used their hard-won knowledge to map the heavens themselves, encoding a celestial calendar into the very alignment of their monuments. Their stone circles were more than temples, they were the world's first permanent clocks. Across continents, the megalithic builders encoded time itself into their monuments, creating calendars of astonishing precision that governed every aspect of their lives. At Nabta Playa in the Egyptian desert, a small circle of standing stones dating back 7,000 years aligns with the rising sun of the summer solstice. This was not a grand cathedral, but a practical, portable observatory for nomadic cattle herders, a way to predict the coming of the seasonal rains upon which their survival depended. Far to the north, at the Callanish Stones in Scotland, the complex layout of the monolith seems to chart the intricate 18.6-year cycle of the moon, marking its most extreme rising and setting points on the horizon. These alignments were not accidental. They represent generations of patient observation, a sacred science passed down from elder to apprentice. How did they achieve such accuracy without written records or complex instruments? They used the world itself as their observatory. A simple wooden pole driven into the ground could serve as a gnomon. By marking the tip of its shadow at noon each day, they could map the sun's journey, identifying the solstices and equinoxes with remarkable consistency. This knowledge was power. For an agricultural society, knowing the exact date of the solstice meant knowing when to plant and when to harvest. It turned the abstract movements of the heavens into a reliable schedule for food security. But the purpose ran far deeper than the practical. These calendars synchronized the spiritual life of the community. A festival held at the exact moment of the solstice sunrise was not just a celebration, it was a ritual reinforcement of the cosmic order. It tied the community's existence to the fundamental rhythms of the universe, affirming that their lives, their deaths, and their rebirths were part of a grand, eternal cycle. Decoding these ancient timekeeping systems requires a fusion of disciplines. Archaeoastronomers use software to recreate prehistoric skies, while ethnographers study the calendar traditions of indigenous cultures, searching for parallels that might illuminate the past. This interdisciplinary work reveals a profound intellectual achievement. The builders were not just stargazers, they were meticulous record keepers who managed time as their most vital resource. They understood its flow, its cycles, and its sacred turning points. This mastery of celestial time allowed them to coordinate vast communal projects, from planting fields to raising stones, weaving the practical and the spiritual into a single, seamless fabric of life. And just as they used stone to mark the passage of time, they used it to tell their stories, leaving behind a visual language carved into the very rock. These silent symbols carved into stone were a language without words. The spirals, zigzags, and mysterious cup and ring marks that cover monuments from Scotland to Iberia were far more than simple decoration. They were a sophisticated system for storing and transmitting vital knowledge. A single cup mark, a small depression pecked into the rock, surrounded by concentric rings, could have served as a map to a hidden water source, a chart of ancestral lineage, or a diagram for a complex ritual that only initiates could understand. Without a written alphabet, these communities used the permanence of stone as their parchment, encoding their most important stories into the very fabric of their sacred spaces. The consistency of these motifs across vast distances is staggering. The same spiral that winds across a tomb slab in Ireland appears on a menhir in Brittany and in a cave sanctuary in Malta. This was not a coincidence, it points to a shared symbolic lexicon, a common set of visual ideas that could be understood across different dialects and cultural groups. A traveler from a distant region might not speak the local language, but upon seeing a specific pattern of rings and channels, they would recognize its sacred significance, understanding they were in a place of burial or a site for celestial observation. Researchers have turned to the art of contemporary indigenous cultures for clues, drawing parallels between the abstract patterns on megaliths and the symbolic art used by shamanic traditions to represent spirit journeys and visions from altered states of consciousness. What we see as a simple zigzag might have been a potent symbol for lightning, water, or the path of a serpent deity. Other motifs, like repeated axe or boat symbols, could have functioned as clan totems, declaring the identity and authority of the family group responsible for the monument. This artistic expression was the most durable medium they had. While wood rots and spoken words fade, the stories hammered into stone could endure for millennia, waiting for a future generation to learn their language. Decoding this imagery is like trying to read a book where we know the alphabet but have lost the dictionary. Yet, by carefully analyzing the context of each carving, its relationship to burials or astronomical alignments, we can begin to reconstruct fragments of their worldview. These symbols preserved the narratives that bound them together, the myths of creation, the histories of heroes, and the instructions for honoring the gods. This deep need to communicate and preserve identity for future generations was rooted in the most fundamental unit of their society, the family, whose daily life and traditions formed the true bedrock of the megalithic world. The rhythms of childhood in these stone-raising cultures were intimately tied to the monuments that defined their landscape. From a very young age, children would have been immersed in the world of the stones, not as awe-inspiring mysteries, but as the backdrop of their daily existence. They learned by doing, playing alongside parents as they ground grain, shaped flint tools, or prepared animal hides, their games subtly teaching them the motor skills and patience they would need as adults. The community itself was the classroom. During the long, light evenings of summer, or gathered around a hearth in winter, elders would have passed down the oral histories that gave meaning to the spirals on the local dolmen, or explained why the sunrise touched a particular stone only on the longest day of the year. This was how knowledge was preserved, not in scrolls but in memory, reinforced by song, story, and the physical presence of the monuments. The archaeological record provides touching glimpses into their young lives. In some tombs, the remains of children are found buried with the same care and accompanied by similar, if smaller, grave goods as adults, a small pottery vessel or a tiny, polished amulet. This suggests they were considered full members of the community, their loss deeply mourned, and their spirits believed to be joining the ancestral watch over the tribe. The very construction of the megaliths was likely a family affair. While the heaviest labor fell to adults, children would have had their roles, perhaps fetching water and food for the work crews, or weaving the ropes that would be used to haul the great stones. This participation wove them into the collective project, making them feel a part of something larger than themselves and ensuring that the skills and the sacred duty would be carried forward. The family unit was the engine of both daily survival and cultural continuity, raising the next generation of farmers, herders, and builders who would maintain the ancient bond between the people and their enduring stones. The clustered stone houses of Skara, Brae huddled together against the North Sea wind, their walls whispering secrets of daily life 5,000 years ago. Stepping inside one of these ancient homes is like walking into a perfectly preserved room from a forgotten world. Each dwelling features the same essential elements: a central hearth for warmth and cooking, stone bed boxes filled with heather, and stone dressers that likely held prized possessions. This remarkable uniformity suggests a society built on strong family units, whether nuclear or extended, all living under a shared cultural blueprint. The very layout of the village, with its covered passageways connecting the homes, speaks of a community deeply interdependent, where private family life flowed seamlessly into public cooperation. The artifacts left behind in these spaces are intensely personal. A polished bead necklace, a finely carved bone pin, a small clay ball that might have been a child's toy. These objects transform anonymous figures from the past into real people with adornment, play, and daily chores. The discovery of small, expertly crafted tools suggests that children learned vital skills not in formal schools, but through hands-on apprenticeship, working alongside their parents from a young age to master flint knapping, pottery making, and textile weaving. Their diet, revealed by middens of discarded shells and animal bones, was a testament to their resourcefulness, combining the bounty of the sea with the products of their small farms. Most profoundly, these domestic settlements were never far from the monumental. The great stone circles and burial mounds were not distant, isolated temples, but integral parts of the lived-in landscape. A child growing up in Skara Brae would have seen the stones of Stennis rising on the horizon from their doorway. The rituals performed there were not abstract events, but milestones in their annual calendar, their spiritual life unfolding with the domestic world always in view. This constant proximity meant that the sacred was woven into the fabric of the everyday. The values and beliefs symbolized by the megaliths, the cycles of life and death, the reverence for ancestors, were reinforced not just at ceremonial times but every single day. This deep integration of home and monument reveals a culture where spirituality was not a separate practice, but the very atmosphere a society breathed. Such a cohesive and resourceful society did not exist in a vacuum, and the artifacts within their homes point to connections that stretched far beyond their own shores. The same stone table appears on opposite sides of the world. From the dolmens of Korea to the burial chambers of Europe, the architectural echo is undeniable, a formal handshake across thousands of miles and countless cultures. How can we explain these startling similarities? Were these ideas carried by ancient mariners along forgotten sea routes, or did different human minds, facing the same fundamental needs, simply arrive at the same monumental solution? This is the profound mystery of convergent cultural evolution versus diffusion. The evidence for long-distance contact is tantalizing. The sheer formal resemblance between, for instance, the Korean dolmens with their massive capstones and the classic table tombs of Brittany is difficult to dismiss as pure coincidence. This has led some researchers to propose the existence of prehistoric maritime networks, where early seafarers trading in shells, stones, and stories could have slowly disseminated the very concept of building in megalithic style. A single traveler's tale of a great stone tomb in a distant land could have inspired a local chief to commission his own, adapted to local beliefs and materials. Yet the argument for independent invention is equally powerful. The human mind, when confronted with the universal experiences of death, the changing seasons, and the need for social cohesion, may naturally gravitate toward certain symbolic forms. A large, permanent stone is a logical choice for marking territory or honoring an ancestor. The urge to build something that outlasts a generation, to create a permanent landmark for a community, could have sparked the same architectural impulse in completely isolated populations. This debate forces us to abandon old, Eurocentric narratives that saw all innovation radiating from a single center. Instead, it opens up a global perspective, revealing a tapestry of prehistoric innovation where humanity was either deeply interconnected or profoundly parallel in its thinking. By carefully comparing sites worldwide, researchers can begin to distinguish what is a universal human tendency from a specific historical connection. This broad, inclusive view is essential, for it places the megaliths not as a quirky European phenomenon, but as a fundamental chapter in the story of humanity itself. And what bound these communities together, whether they invented their traditions independently or borrowed them, were shared experiences that forged their identity. The proof of this communal spirit is often found in the very soil of these sacred sites, in the scattered remains of great feasts. The ground around these ancient stones is littered with the echoes of celebration. Thick layers of animal bones, shattered pottery, and the remnants of great hearths tell a story not of silent worship, but of vibrant communal feasts that brought entire societies together. At Durrington Walls, a massive settlement just 2 miles from Stonehenge itself, archaeologists have uncovered a staggering midden, a prehistoric garbage dump filled with the bones of tens of thousands of animals, mostly pigs and cattle. The sheer volume of food waste points to feasting on a truly colossal scale, events that would have drawn people from across the region. These were not casual meals, they were central to the social and spiritual machinery of megalithic life. The choice of animals was deeply symbolic. The selective slaughter of prime, healthy cattle, creatures that represented a family's wealth and status, was a potent sacrifice. By consuming these valued animals together, the community was performing a powerful act of redistribution, where a leader's generosity in providing the feast reinforced social bonds and legitimized their authority. Imagine the scene as hundreds of people gathered, the air thick with smoke and the sound of celebration. These feasts likely coincided with pivotal moments in the year, the solstices, the completion of a monument's phase, or the honoring of ancestral spirits. The consumption of food was a sensory ritual that connected the living to the divine, a shared experience that turned abstract beliefs into a tangible, communal reality. This practice also had a profoundly practical engine. How do you motivate hundreds of people to haul 50-ton stones for weeks on end? You feed them. Feasting provided the caloric incentive and the social reward for back-breaking labor. A successful construction project culminated in a great communal meal, transforming exhausting work into a shared achievement and a celebration of collective identity. The broken pots and gnawed bones left behind are more than just trash. They are the fossilized remnants of laughter, conversation, and negotiation. They reveal a society that understood the power of a shared meal to strengthen the very fabric of their world, making the eventual silence of these sites all the more profound. The great stone circles fell quiet, their construction ceasing not with a bang but with a slow, centuries-long sigh. By the end of the Bronze Age, the relentless drive to raise these colossal monuments had faded across much of Europe, leaving a profound silence in the quarries and on the sacred hills. This was not a single event, but a complex unraveling, a tapestry of causes that differed from one valley to the next. In some regions, a shifting climate brought colder, wetter weather that shortened growing seasons and strained agricultural surplus, making it harder to feed the massive workforces needed for such grand projects. Social structures were transforming too, as power began to consolidate in the hands of warrior elites who valued gleaming metal swords and hilltop forts more than communal stone temples. The very technology that defined the New Age, metalworking, demanded a different kind of investment, redirecting skilled labor and valuable resources away from the back-breaking work of quarrying and hauling stone. For some communities, the old traditions may have simply lost their meaning, their spiritual power diluted by new religious ideas or severed by the trauma of invasion or epidemic that scattered populations and broke the chain of oral knowledge. Yet, to say these places were abandoned is not entirely accurate. Their significance evolved. A dolmen built 4,000 years earlier might find a new purpose 1,000 years later as a Christian burial site, its ancient stones sanctified by a new faith. A stone circle became the foundation for a medieval village, its stones repurposed for houses and walls, its original cosmic alignment forgotten but its enduring presence respected. This pattern of reuse tells a powerful story. It shows that the power of these places never truly vanished. It was simply reinterpreted by each new generation that encountered them. There is no single, blanket explanation for why the megalithic age waned, only a mosaic of local stories shaped by environment, technology, and human choice. This final mystery of their decline is perhaps the most human of all, a reminder that no cultural practice, no matter how deeply rooted, is immune to the relentless currents of change. And it is this very impermanence that makes our own connection to these sites so poignant, a personal encounter with a past that still speaks directly to the present. That same profound hush still falls over visitors today, walking among the towering stones of a place like Avebury or gazing up at the colossal slabs of a dolmen. It is impossible not to feel a deep, personal connection to the countless generations who have stood in that exact spot. This is more than simple curiosity. It is a visceral sense of wonder, a humbling reminder of our own brief moment in a vast human story. For many, the experience transcends the historical, touching something spiritual. They speak of a palpable energy, a quiet vibration emanating from the ancient rock, a feeling of being in the presence of something deeply sacred. These sensations are intensely personal, shaped by our own beliefs and cultural lenses, yet they point to a universal human capacity for awe. This powerful allure has transformed these sites into global destinations, where tourists and pilgrims alike walk the same paths once trod by Neolithic farmers. But the influence of the megaliths extends far beyond tourism. They have captivated artists for centuries, their stark forms and mysterious origins inspiring painters and sculptors. Writers weave them into fantasy novels as places of ancient power, while philosophers ponder them as monuments to human ambition and the sobering reality of civilizational change. They stand as silent tutors in resilience, demonstrating what can be achieved with ingenuity and collective will, and they challenge us to look at our own sprawling cities and wonder what, if anything, we are building that will endure for 5,000 years. They force a question not about the past but about our future. What will our legacy be? By listening to these personal reflections, we stop seeing the megaliths as cold, distant artifacts and begin to hear them as living monuments, their silent narrative continuing to unfold with every visitor who feels that inexplicable pull. This deep, emotional resonance is the final key that unlocks their greatest secret, not how they were built, but why they still matter so profoundly to us today. We are left not with answers, but with a deeper, more profound respect. The vanished builders of the megaliths were not primitive mystics or recipients of alien aid. They were the architects of their own destiny. They were sophisticated societies with a breathtaking command of engineering, a meticulous understanding of the stars, and a powerful social organization that could unite thousands toward a single, multi-generational goal. We have walked alongside them, from the quarries where they mastered stone to the celestial alignments they encoded with such care. We have met them as families, as feasting communities, and as innovators whose ideas may have traveled across oceans. The old myths of giants and lost super-civilizations have been gently set aside, not to diminish the wonder, but to reclaim it for the true heroes, the ordinary people who achieved the extraordinary. And yet, for all we have uncovered, the deepest mysteries remain. Why did certain symbols resonate from one end of the continent to the other? What sacred stories were truly told in the resonant chambers? These lingering questions are not failures of our investigation, but a gift. They remind us that history is a grand puzzle, forever missing pieces, and that the pursuit of understanding is itself a form of reverence. Let these silent, enduring giants be an inspiration. Seek out the ancient stones in your own region, walk among them, and feel the connection to that distant past. Or simply carry their lesson with you, a reminder of what human ingenuity and cooperation can build when driven by a shared, sacred purpose. Thank you for joining this long investigation into our shared human story. If this journey has sparked your curiosity, your engagement helps keep the legacy of these builders alive. Share your own thoughts and discoveries below. Together, we ensure these stones never truly fall silent.